Hey guys, welcome back. So today and throughout this week, I'm just going to take you along. I have various things I need to do in the garden and seed starting, and the first thing on my list for this week is to get the onions planted. So I'm following a lot of what I did last year but tweaking it a little bit. So last year I planted out 6 weeks before my last average frost, which is exactly what we're doing again today. One thing I did differently compared to previous years is I sowed them out a little differently. So I did do soil blocks last year, but I had about 3 or 4 onions per block, and this year I tried to make sure I got 1 onion per block. I have a handful that have 2 onion seeds per block that I will split, but I'm hoping this will just allow the process to go a lot easier, and also just not disturbing the roots will help the onions. At least that's my thought here. Planting onions can be a little tedious, so this is always one of those days that kind of takes at least an hour or so to get planting. I am going to prep the bed. So with planting onions, I will go ahead, remove all of this current straw here, and then I'm going to lay some soil amendments. So what I did last year and what I'm planning on doing this year is using a fertilizer with a higher middle number than 2 lower numbers just for the initial planting. I've been feeding my onion starts with a kelp and seaweed fertilizer, which is the exact same higher number in the middle and lower numbers on the side. That is your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So that is what I'm going to go ahead and get started, is getting these garden beds prepped. I originally planned to do this whole garden bed and this partial bed here, and if I need to I can go into the other bed. But so one thing that didn't go well was actually my seed starting of onions. I had a handful of about 30 to 40 onions just not germinate, unfortunately. So I am a little bit short on what I originally planned. So I think I will be able to get away with probably just doing this garden bed and probably that garden bed. At least that's what I'm going to start with, and then if I need to do any more, I will. I will say this is my 4th year growing onions. Last year was my most successful year, and that's one reason why I've been really gravitating off of everything I did last year, but slightly tweaking it just to see if I can get that much more better onions. I was so proud of my onion harvest last year. I had these nice, beautiful onion bulbs, and I am really hoping for the same for 2024. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna get all of this straw removed off of the top of the garden beds. And one thing I'm gonna do is actually aerate the soil with my garden fork and then sprinkle in what I'm going to use to feed the onions initially. So I will continue to feed them after this with that kelp and fish fertilizer that I've been doing, but this is just some starter fertilizer I have had, and if it's the ratios I need. So I'm gonna sprinkle that in, and then as always, I sprinkle in some worm castings. I'm obviously no expert, so take my advice with a grain of salt. All I know is I grew big onions. The soil's actually already pretty loose and fluffy, so I might not have to do too much of this. Actually, I won't. It's really not compact at all. Okay, so when getting everything prepped, I did find a handful of grubs. This is something you don't want to keep in your soil. They are not a good pest. So a few years back, I did have a grub problem, especially in my compost, and I sprayed beneficial nematodes, which I probably should go ahead and just do, considering I have found a handful. I always find a handful no matter what, but considering I haven't sprayed them in 2 years, I'll probably go ahead and do that this year. But always get rid of your grubs, and since I have chickens, they're just gonna go ahead and go to the chickens. Honestly, having chickens is one of the best things when it comes to the garden. Are you girls excited? I got a treat. It's also one of the best revenges. There you go. Get them. Okay, so when it comes to the spacing, I have a yardstick here, and my plan is to start them 6 inches inside the bed. So with onions, you don't want to plant them too deep. Like I said, if you're using the onion with the root, you don't want to go more than 1 inch down. That will end up causing issues when it comes to bulbing later. So since these are already in their soil block, I'm just going to place them in the ground and have them still surface level where they're currently at. And I can already tell this is going to be significantly easier planting than any of my other years, because I would just seed them and pull apart all of them, and then you're dealing with very, very small plants. And I had a feeling this would be a lot easier, even though it was a little bit more tedious to do. Obviously, the more you space them, they have a little bit more room, a little bit more nutrients, hopefully giving you a better onion. You will see spacing kind of all over the place with onions, and it's kind of a preference thing. Most of the time though, you're looking at about 6 inches if you're looking for bulbing onions at minimum. So by having the yardstick, I can just see where I'm currently at and then just keep going. I also prefer to plant mostly in the evening or a very overcast day. As I started this today, it was already 3 o'clock, so I'm sure we're sitting close to like 3:34. That just really helps the plant just be a little bit more established and not have to deal with getting used to the soil while dealing with like the peak sun of the day. I'm so happy with how that went. Having the onions in their individual soil blocks made planting 10 times easier. I ended up having about 20 toward the end there. That ended up being 2 per block. And I will say they definitely did not look as strong at the base. They still looked good. But as long as this goes really well this year, that is going to be the way I sow onions probably for eternity. Planting them was so easy. They look so strong. So one thing I did want to mention is, you guys know I have been trimming off the tops. I trimmed off the tops about, I would say 4 to 6 times until planting day. Now I won't touch them at all. These onions at this point will only get fertilized with that kelp and fish fertilizer until harvest day. It's really easy at this point. I did lightly mulch toward bulbing time. I might push away some of that mulch, but it is so loose and so little that I might not have to really worry about it. I don't think I pushed back much last year, to be honest, but I am just so happy with how that went. Planting went so much faster than it did in previous years. And the ones I had to break apart, honestly, like my hands are just a complete mess at that point. And you have to be really tedious with putting them in the ground, and having the soil blocks, I think it's just gonna overall be so much better because I didn't have any type of root disturbance or anything like that. Overall, I'm so excited. And now like I have this little field of green with my onions and my garlic, and honestly, it just makes me so happy. Here are all the onions. I did space them close to about 7 inches apart, and then I did 10 inches between rows here. So I have been hardening off some more seedlings over here, and these ones are ready to go to be planted. So here's all of my broccoli, my romaine, kale, cabbage, and collards. I will say the cabbage does not look as hot, but we'll see how it goes. Lavender won't be planted yet. This is lavender, it's just in the same thing, but it was fine for today. But as far as the romaine goes, I'm probably gonna go ahead and plant it in this interior part of the trellis. That's my plan for this, in the interior here. And I might go ahead and plant some of this broccoli too, because we really don't have a single low under freezing for the next week, and they survive really well with cold. So if I need to, I have some frost fabric, and a lot of that's gonna go in the in-ground space, which I still need to kind of mess with. Toward the end of summer into fall, I didn't have much end up growing here, so I don't think I have to really amend much. I put really, really nice soil down, so I probably just need to kind of loosen it up. All right, so it's the next day. I am going to get some seeds started today. So I don't have too much I'm starting today. Majority of like my tomatoes and things like that will all be started next week, and then flowers will be started about 2 weeks after that. And then we are already done seed starting. Honestly, the seed starting room feels so bare getting the onions out. All I have is peppers, oregano, snapdragons, and my sweet potatoes, which I'll show you guys a little closer up in a minute. So the sweet potatoes, I am trying to do my own slips. This is something I've never done, so fingers crossed it goes well. I do think I have like an eye forming, so I think we are starting to maybe get our first slip. We will see. But I did have a few questions on the snapdragons with germination and things like that. I had perfect germination. I had a comment asking because they planted the same variety I did. I did the early sunrise Potomac, I believe is what it's called, and I had really good germination. So one thing I've been doing a lot differently this year is while the seeds are being germinated, I've been using a humidity dome, and honestly I have found that game changer, especially for those super tiny seeds that need light to germinate. You really don't want your soil to dry out at all when they're in that process of beginning to germinate, and I think that just made a huge difference. But Some of these seeds today are also just as tiny. I know oregano is just as tiny. So I ended up getting a floret variety of dahlias. This is called the Bee's Choice, and I think it's so gorgeous. So this seed pack is a bunch of different colors. So I do plan to just plant out a bunch and hopefully find room for them. This was a very last minute spur of decision buy. I saw these and I was like, I have to try to grow dahlias. So I've never grown dahlias before, but I'm really excited about that. I'm also going to be planting a good amount of oregano. So in the last few years, I've planted out about 3 to 4 plants, and honestly, that is just not enough to get me through the year. I typically don't have too many issues when it comes to planting herbs and growing them for the year, but for some reason, oregano has been a tricky one for the last 2 years. So I do want to get a good amount of oregano sowed today, and then I'm also doing a new one that I'm so excited about. So this is the Zinger hibiscus, and this is the hibiscus that you use for tea. And that is one reason why I'm really, really excited about trying to do this. And then if I have time today, I don't know if I'm gonna do this today or tomorrow, but I'm gonna go ahead and get my breadseed poppies sown outside. I am so excited about these breadseed poppies. Last year I grew poppies and I really learned that there is a culinary difference. There's a culinary poppy, which is the breadseed poppy that you use for poppy seed muffins and things like that. And then there's just your ornamental poppy. So very excited to give these a try. So honestly, I don't have too much to do. And what I'm gonna do with all of these is just do some soil blocks today. I have some soil here that should be good to go as far as moisture goes. Where is my, oh, there it is. I left it in there for some reason. I should have enough soil in here all mixed up. I love having a container like this just to have soil ready, get it all nice and moist for soil blocking and things like that. I did wash some trays, but I do need some of my mesh trays. So whenever I soil block, I love using these mesh trays lined in a regular 10-20. This really helps with all bottom watering. That way I can water and then I don't have the soil blocks kind of deteriorate or anything. So with the sweet potatoes, I'm hoping I can create my own slips. It seems pretty easy. That's something I've never done. I have grown sweet potatoes one time, but I was given the slips. It was, I think, my second year garden that happened. Again, it seems fairly easy. For any reason, I get 0 sweet potato slips. My plan for the sweet potatoes is to put them in grow bags under my A-frame trellis in the in-ground space. And for any reason that does not work, I think what I'll do is plant a winter squash over there in that area. I wasn't planning on planting any winter squash this year just because sweet potatoes and the winter squash variety I grow, which is the honey nut, have pretty similar flavor profile. So I didn't want to have an overabundance of sweet potatoes and squash that tasted the same, because you can use the squash and sweet potatoes and recipes the same and things like that. So I do have a backup plan if it doesn't work. I do have the seeds from last year, so I'm really not too worried if it doesn't work, but I'm hoping it works because I think it'd be nice to have some sweet potatoes. I am not planting any regular potatoes this year. Unfortunately, I just don't think I have enough space where I can really grow the amount I'm wanting to grow. Last year, I grew 2 garden beds worth, and honestly, all of those potatoes were gone within like a month and a half. The amount of potatoes I use versus what I can grow and how much space they take up. And gosh, seed potatoes are expensive too. And obviously the more seed potatoes you buy, the cheaper they are. So until I get more land or figure out a different solution for that, I might grow potatoes again, but this year I'm just going to completely skip unless I randomly decide to. But I don't see that being on the agenda for the year. I am going to try to control myself here and just plant 8 of each, because again, I don't even know where I'm going to put these dahlias. All I know is I'm going to be putting them somewhere, and I want to have all of them. I probably really don't need more than 8 oregano plants, and As far as hibiscus goes, I don't know. I've never experienced it. So if for any reason I have spotty germination, I have time where I can just grow more, but I'm just gonna go ahead and get all of these labeled. I don't think I've ever spelled dahlia before. It took me a second. So I just like to use painter's tape. It comes off really easy when it comes to anything plastic related like this. I believe the oregano is surface level. Do not cover. They need light to germinate. Okay, so these are very similar to lavender and also the snapdragons. Very, very tiny seeds. I don't even know if you guys can see how tiny those seeds truly are. So I will probably have to thin out a little bit. Yeah, so like I said earlier, I actually never used humidity domes outside of my first year of seed starting. I never really thought they were truly necessary, which I don't think they're truly necessary, but I will say they've been a game changer this year. It was something I wanted to play around with a little bit more, and my germination rates have been phenomenal. I had all but one pepper plant, I believe, germinate, and I'm fine with that. What one was it? It was a banana pepper, and I sowed extra banana peppers anyway, so honestly not too worried about that. And I think my banana pepper seeds were like four or 5 years old at this point. Man, hibiscus gets sown half an inch deep. These must be some fairly big seeds. Those are actually like little pellety size. Every year I really like to try to find some varieties I've never grown before that either I use in my daily life or I think will just be pretty to add to the garden. Every single year I like to get at least one new flower. My first few years gardening, I actually never really planted much flowers outside of sunflowers, and I love flowers so much. I really just love the combination of something really pretty while being aside all of like the vegetables and herbs that I use all the time. And then the dahlias are 1/4 of an inch. Oh, they're actually bigger seeds than I thought they were. They look very similar to zinnia seeds. Showed you guys all the other seeds. There are the dahlias. I will say these seeds were probably my most expensive seed packet purchase I've ever had. I think they were like $14 or $15. Like I said though, they are so gorgeous. So that was my treat yourself spur of the moment plant that I did. Where's my water bottle? And I'm just going to give these a little mist on the top. And I'm also going to get a heat mat for these because all of the soil, minus the oregano can be pretty frost tolerant, but most seeds still do better like in a 60-ish environment. And since I'm in my basement, I typically have been using the heat mats just to jumpstart the germinating process since it's a bit colder down here. Heat mats are one of those things that I don't leave on once the germination is pretty much good to go. I did for the peppers just a little bit because they love really, really warm soil, but I went ahead and cut the heat mat at that point. All right, so let me show you everything we have going on down here. Here are all the peppers plus rosemary. So here's the rosemary, and here are all of the peppers. So my peppers are starting to get their first true leaves on. Ignore my really dirty nails. They were just in soil. But this is the most pepper varieties I have ever grown. So I have bell, cayenne, jalapeno, serrano, paprikas, a snacking pepper. I feel like I missed banana. I don't know if I said that or not, but I think I have 6 or 7 different varieties, which is the most I've ever done in one year. This is my white sage plant that I've overwintered. I honestly could probably go ahead and clip it and make some more white sage bundles. This is the ones we just did, the hibiscus, oregano, and also the dahlias under the humidity dome. And then here are all of the snapdragons. They're looking really good. Probably here in a week or two, once they get a bit bigger, I will go ahead and thin them out to 1 per block. And then the last thing I currently have going are the sweet potatoes. And that is the little notch I told you guys I feel like will be my first little slip. If it is a slip, I'm really hoping that the sweet potatoes go well. But if they don't, I got a backup plan. My plan originally was to get the lettuce and the broccoli planted out in about a week and a half, but if our weather still stays nice like it's looking, that might go out a little bit sooner. So it's actually a pretty good day to go ahead and get these poppies planted in the ground. The chickens are going crazy because they see me at the moment, but we're supposed to get rain in the next few days, and that will really help the whole germinating process. And we're just also getting warm at the moment, and these do well when they're planted in a little bit cooler weather. Last year I planted my poppies I think in another week, so it's time. So similar to yesterday, I'm going to rake up any of the extra mulch or leaves that have been here over winter. All I'm doing is slightly aerating the soil here with my garden fork, and then I'm gonna go over in my compost pile and just top this area with a little bit of compost. This whole area was amended last fall, so there's really not too much I need to do to it. But I'm thinking I'll just plant half of this poppies. One of these days, I really need to invest in a broad fork. So like I said before, I do need to move this whole entire compost pile regardless. I'm actually really wanting to line the fence here with some grow bags because it's just such a prime location. And I also really want the compost to be closer to the chickens. And I just want to build a whole new system. We really don't like the fact that this is all open and it's just hard to kind of keep everything in. But I do have compost and soil being delivered on Friday that I'm going to be using to fill different grow bags and things like that. So I do need to start getting this moved, even though 2 of these aren't completely done yet. This middle one is the only one I can really grab from at the moment, but it all needs to be moved regardless. These girls are being crazy. This is always the part that's tricky with the in-ground space, is I have this edging here, and that was because we had an English bulldog that we couldn't trust with the in-ground space. So it's always kind of hard to get soil dumped in here, but that worked. I also got a different wheelbarrow since then, so that one's a bit taller than my old one. All right, and I think I'm just gonna do half the bed. And then I'm just going to slightly rake them in just to make sure that they're underneath some soil here. And then I'm gonna take some of the straw I use and just lightly layer that on top to make sure that the soil stays nice and moist. So this is the brand of straw I use. It's called Easy Straw. It is garden safe. I like to use it. I've used it, gosh, I think almost every year now since I started gardening, minus the first year. I didn't know how important it was to mulch. So especially where I'm at in Kansas with the wind, it can just dry out your soil really, really fast. And having a nice mulch is just really nice. And this doesn't break down too fast. You can see I used all of the old mulch that I overwintered with the onions yesterday. Honestly, I might just go ahead and top the rest of the areas while I'm out here today with that middle portion of my compost bin. That way I can get that out of the way. This will be important for me to make sure that it stays nice and moist while the seeds are germinating for the next like 7 to 14 days. I shouldn't have too much of a problem because again, I'm having all of that rain come through too. I think that's going to be all I'm going to get done for today. I'm getting really hungry. I need to go start dinner. I'm roasting a chicken, so it's going to take some time. But I think I might try to run to one of the stores tomorrow and grab some more mulch for my in-ground space, just to make sure everything looks nice and pretty. But I was able to get all of the compost out of that middle space, so it's really nice to get that all cleared out and get this completely ready. So for this space, my plan is to do broccoli, poppies, a few other flowers. And then like I said, my A-frame here is going to be for the sweet potatoes. But what I'm doing for the sweet potatoes is in this middle space here where that mulch currently is where I'm going to be putting those grow bags and allow those vines to grow up. So I'm actually still going to be able to plant in these 2 rows, and I might my original plan was to do the cabbage, but like I said, that cabbage isn't really looking too great, so I'm honestly probably not going to plant it, but that gives me more space for flowers, which makes me happy. So this morning I went ahead and ran to the store to go ahead and get cedar wood chips. That way I can make sure the in-ground space is ready to go. If you're ever using wood chips in your garden, it's really important to make sure that they are not dyed. I just get plain Jane cedar wood chips, and I get the ones that are just a little bit thicker. These ones don't break down as fast as the ones that are really micro. I can typically just top this at the beginning of spring and call it a day, and honestly I really didn't need to top it. It was more just for aesthetic reasons. The wood chips, since I've layered them the last few years, have just hung on really well, but we are starting to get a little bit of a cool front coming through the next few days. They're supposed to drop and we're supposed to get some rain and things like that. So I'm just going to do a few other things in the garden space today that I really wanted to get done this week. And I'm gonna go ahead and start with getting the strawberry bed weeded. So I typically have my strawberry cage over the strawberries. If you're interested on how to make this, I have a whole step-by-step video that I will make sure I tag, but we lifted it off the other day. That way I could go ahead and weed it. Without that cage, I pretty much don't get strawberries. The birds and the squirrels will just eat that. So that is one reason why I have the cage. But you can see it's pretty much a weedy mess, and there's like old grass in here from last year, old crabgrass and things like that. And the new strawberries are starting to grow and everything. So I'm gonna get all of this weeded, and I'm also going to get this bed fed. And I'm also going to do my second round of feeding with the garlic today as well. So when it comes to hand weeding anything in my garden beds, this is one of my favorite garden tools. This is just a hand weeder, and this little area here really grips at the root and gets the whole thing out. This is so handy when it comes to dandelions. I am typically someone that will leave dandelions unless they are in my garden beds, because they really do help aerate the soil and they're one of the first flowers for the bees. But today we are going to get some dandelions out of this bed with this weeder. When it comes to weeds, if you can get majority of that root or the whole root, this will help your weeds not come back. Now that I got this bed all weeded, what I'm going to do is give it a good feed. So when it comes to strawberries, you're looking at just a very balanced fertilizer. Everything I've always read is just make sure all the numbers are the same. And I'm just trying to get through all of like the random fertilizers I currently have. So I have this 444 fertilizer that I'm going to sprinkle on, and then I'm going to get this re-mulched and also well watered. Even though we have rain coming in, I don't think we're going to get that much rain where it will make a difference. This bed is actually pretty dry, and we haven't had, I don't think we've had rain in at least a month now. And now the strawberry bed is all ready to go for the springtime. It looks so much better. The last thing I'm going to get done today in the garden is to feed my garlic. So 2 weeks ago, I fed my garlic, and I told you guys I was feeding my garlic a little bit differently this year. So I've been using this fish and seaweed fertilizer for the onions as well. And honestly, I'm so happy with how the garlic responded. It is looking so good. So I'm just going to keep up with this, but look how amazing the garlic is looking already. It really looks so good. So I'm really excited to see just how well the garlic turns out this year. I almost forgot to show you guys, I have some chamomile popping up in a few areas. So with this, for just a foliar feed, I'm doing 1/8 of a cup per gallon, and I'm using my handy dandy little sprayer here. I will say this stuff does not smell the best, and when I spray it, it makes it smell like a lake out here. And I know I had a few people ask about this last time, so it's just the Neptune's Harvest Kelp and Fish Fertilizer. I'll make sure I link it for you guys. And I know someone's going to ask me this since I am doing so much in the garden today. My last average frost, if I didn't mention when planting the onions, is roughly 6 weeks away. So we still have some time where frost can happen. We have 0 frost in the forecast for the next 14 days, and I don't think we've had a single low under like 35 in a handful of days. When it comes to like tomatoes and peppers and all those things, I typically wait for our low to be averaging in the 50s at night. This spring, which it isn't even spring yet, so end of winter has been so much warmer than last year so far. And I do see a dandelion popping up right here. So as always, it's really important to make sure that you are weeding around your garlic. They do not like competition whatsoever. I'm gonna be really careful not to get this garlic. There we go. Oh, wow. Yeah, I was able to get the whole root on that. I'm telling you, this hand weeder is so good for things like this. But either way, guys, I hope you enjoyed spending a few days out here in the garden with me. I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye.